What's going on, people? Happy Monday, and welcome back to another episode of the Athletes to Athletes podcast. During today's episode, I chat with my friend Parker Navarro, who decided to leave sunny California for UNC Wilmington to run track and cross country. She talks about how she fell in love with the sport from a very young age and how she knew it was time to move on and focus on her post-collegiate career path as she entered her senior year. So again, welcome back to the Athletes to Athletes podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. So back with another A2A podcast. Today, talking to another friend of mine, Parker. Really excited to talk to you. Every time we were in the office last time when I saw you in person, it was always in passing. We were always walking by each other. I think you had a Dodger hat on once in the office, and that's how we actually started to talk. I think your first week or something, you were being introduced to everyone. You know, probably that whole intro that everybody does. So, but besides that, you know, obviously with being in the sports industry like we're all athletes, right? And, you know, I never knew what sport you played until a while after meeting you. So, you know, once kind of finding that out was always pretty cool. But I'm going to, before we get into your entire conversation, allow you to introduce yourself, let the community know who you are, where you're from, and a little bit more about you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. It's good to catch up with an old fellow coworker. As you said, my name's Parker. I ran cross country and track all throughout my life. I still run every once in a while. And I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Made the move from down south from Austin, where you and I met. And I work at Comcast now. I live with my boyfriend, and who is also a runner. So we're both kind of running geeks. So I'm super excited to talk about this with you on the podcast.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So where are you originally from, though?
I'm from Los Angeles area. It's called Thousand Oaks. It's like halfway between LA and Santa Barbara. Great area, like so much nature around it, trails, and just like so much to offer. I feel like that's kind of what got me started with running. It's just such a great place to be active.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the weather's nice. You can be outdoors more often than you can here in Pennsylvania, where we are at. So, you know, talk about that a little bit, where you're growing up as an athlete. What other sports, before you got into cross country and track, did you play any other sports as a young athlete? Or was it more so once you got older, you're like, I really like this and this is something I want to get into?
Yeah, it's so funny you bring that up because I was like such an unathletic kid growing up. I tried horseback riding for a bit. That was not my thing. And then I did softball, and finally after like 4 years of not being able to hit a ball, my dad said, okay, maybe we try something new. And then I did soccer, and I thought soccer was really fun. But I just like didn't really love like the intensity of it and how people were like physically aggressive with each other. That was just so not me. Because I've always said I'm like not the most competitive person in the world. And that's why it was perfect for me to like find running. Like, I don't know. I remember being in middle school when I was in 6th grade, and I was in band. I played clarinet for 5 years. So I did band in elementary and middle school. And so I had a PE class really early in the morning with a bunch of other different band kids. And whenever we would run the mile or do like a half mile run or something like that, I was always like way ahead of everybody else, which was so shocking because I like didn't ever consider myself a sporty or athletic person. But I thought it was fun to like win and challenge myself. And I'm like, oh, this is great. They're like making us run and we get to do stuff. And I think this is kind of where like my competitive edge started to come up. There's this other boy in my class who now is like a good friend of mine in my friend group. But I feel like he was kind of the only one that could like challenge me, and we would always like race against each other, like who would win that day. And so after being able to do that, my dad was like, maybe we should try track. And I tried it and I was okay at it. Like not the best, not the worst, but I thought it was really fun. And I just really like to run and all of my friends there. And so I kept doing it. And then one day, I think I might have been like 12 or 13. My dad was like, there are really fast girls in your race. I was racing the 800 at like one of my track meets or something. And he's like, why don't you try and keep up with them and like see if you can do it? And I was like, okay, Dad, sounds good. So I tried and I ran a really fast time for whatever age I was. And from there, I was totally hooked. I just really wanted to keep getting better, keep lowering my time. And then I ran cross country and track in college or high school. Cross country was a little harder for me. I'm just not the best long distance runner. I think I'm definitely more of a mid distance person. And yeah, then I kept running track in high school and I wasn't the best student in the world. So I kind of focused on running a little more. Maybe that could get me into a 4-year college because that's what I wanted to do. And I started getting recruited from places, and then that's how I ended up a college athlete. But that's pretty much an overview of how I got started in the sport, I would say.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Where and that's the best story, right? Where it's not something that you were forced to do. It's not something that was hard for you to do. It was natural and something you were having fun with that you turned
Mm-hmm.
into, you parlayed this into a college career. As a young athlete though, did you have those dreams of sports taking you to that next level, or do you feel like, and you said like, you weren't the best student when you were, in high school. A lot of us weren't. It was more sports and friends and having fun on a Friday night than it was
Mm-hmm.
hitting the books, right? So was getting to college on, a scholarship, maybe not athletic or something else, was that something that you thought was in the cards for you, or did you continue to just have fun with sports and allow it to progress and get you to where you wanted to be?
No, yeah, that's a good question. And I think that's definitely something that happens to a lot of people is like maybe they don't necessarily realize it until later. Like I would say in middle school and early high school, it wasn't a goal of mine. Like, oh, I'm dying to run in college. I didn't even really know what I wanted yet. But I had a lot of friends in high school that were a year above me that were really fast as well. I would say in my grade, there was maybe like one or two other girls that I ran with and were that I could like do workouts with and stuff. But there were like four girls ahead of me, the year ahead of me, that were really, really great. Like third in the state grade, getting invited to the big invitationals to run. And they just challenged me so much to like get faster. I had some bad injuries like earlier in high school too. So I feel like that was a bit of a setback in junior year when I saw all of them getting recruited and having these amazing final last season, senior year for cross country and track. I was like, oh, like this is probably something that I could consider too. Like I'm not quite their level yet, but maybe I will be next year and I can keep getting better. And then that's when I could like maybe get recruited to run track. And so seeing them like go through the recruiting process and like figure out what level they could succeed at definitely propelled me to be like, yeah, I think this is something I could do too. And like junior and senior year on, I was obsessed with the idea of like running in a program in college.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. And as you started to progress, is that when you saw kind of your mentality change of like being more aggressive, I guess, when it comes to being an athlete? And I mean, it's as much as people don't realize it. When you are, I didn't run track, my brother did, but when you're out there and it's just you and it's your endurance and everything else, it's it's like you're singling yourself out completely. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
big mental game, right? Is that where you started to see that competitive spirit kind of come through and figure out, okay, this is something that I really want to do?
Yeah, for sure. And like, I still always talk about this all the time with my friends and my partner. I'm still to this day would not say I've like ever been a competitive person, even when I was running track and like running at a relatively intense level in high school. I would say that was kind of my peak of when I was running my fastest was in high school and I was trying to get recruited. It wasn't really about competing against, like you said, other runners in track because you are relatively isolated. It's more of a mental game. It was definitely just like trying to be the best version of myself and be as fast as I could be and just get my time down. Like I think that's the nice aspect of track is that you have a concrete time that you have to keep getting lower and lower. And so it's like you're able to compete with the clock. It doesn't necessarily have to be other runners. And like I thought that was a really good way for me to look at it. I felt like I would get so anxious if I thought about I have to win this race, I have to do this for the team to get these points. But if it was like, oh, I haven't broken 520 in the mile yet, I really want to break 520. It's like I know next race coming up, there's going to be a few girls in that race that have run like 515s and 510s. So like I could just try and stick with them and like try and beat the clock. And like I feel like that is like what brought my competitive edge per se out, is just trying my hardest to be the best that I could be and get the fastest times that I could.
Mhm. Now, did you start to see other aspects of life change once your mentality changed around sports where, you know, things with grades started to change because you're like, okay, I need to be able to make it into these schools. It's not just based on my athletic ability. They're looking at, what type of student I am too, and what type of person you are. So did you start to see different aspects of your life change based on what you were trying to do on the track?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question, and I've never really thought of it like that. But when you say it, for sure. I was injured my sophomore year of high school. I tore my meniscus in the beginning of the summer, right before cross country season, and it took them forever to figure out what was wrong with it. And then I had to get surgery in December once they finally figured out it was torn and how they wanted to approach it. They actually had to completely repair it, not just like take out a little piece of it. They sewed it up. So I was on crutches for like 8 or 10 weeks, missed track season 2. And I feel like my grades really suffered during that time. I got like D's my second semester when I was recovering from surgery. My parents like had no idea what was going on. And pretty like unlike me too, because I had relatively high SAT scores. Like I feel like my parents knew I was like a bright kid. I was in honors classes. And so summer before junior year, when I started running again and training, I still didn't have the most amazing cross country season. I feel like cross country was never my primary sport, and like coming back into a competitive season after surgery was so hard for me too, that I still feel like I was struggling in school a little bit. But then once I noticed like I was able to challenge myself on the track and actually get where I wanted to be, my grades did definitely shoot up. I feel like I was so much of a better student, like the last half of high school for myself, when I could like focus and I wanted to get into college, like you said, and have that goal ahead of me and like not be the person that let some bad classes like get to her on her resume. I really tried to like get my SAT scores as high as I could and work really hard in calculus. That was like my downfall. I remember I had to like go in at lunch like 3 times a week to try and figure out what she was talking about. But I did. I like worked a lot harder for sure.
Yeah. So as you're starting to progress and, recovering from injury and everything else, you talked about wanting to be recruited. When did the letters start to come, the phone calls start to come, and what types of things did you do during that process to make sure that coaches knew who you were? Were you reaching out through email? Were you sending any sort of letters? Were you just trying to make sure you were getting to the best events, or did you just kind of let it all come to you?
Yeah, that's a super interesting question because I was thinking about it before you asked me to get on this podcast, and I kind of realized like it wasn't necessarily sparked from people reaching out to me. Like I said, it was sparked from like watching these girls ahead of me get recruited by places. And like, I think it's so amazing now that all of these kids have such great resources to get recruited, whether it be track or soccer or tennis, whatever it is. But like coming from a track perspective, it's really nice because like you don't need to make a reel or anything. Like you literally have your times listed online. You can like tell them what you're specializing in, what you're looking to do, like where you think you could be a good fit on the team. And so that's kind of what I did. Like my friends sent me their email template that they use to reach out to coaches. And I kind of like sat down with my dad. Okay, like what do I want to do? Like, do I want to stay in state? Do I want to go out of state? And they basically said, like, if you can get money to run and you can go to an out of state school and get it around the same in state price, then you can go out of state if you want. So I like reached out to schools both in California and then also far away. I've always been such a nomad since graduating college. I've lived in Texas, Boston, now Philly. And so my mom is from the South, and for some reason I like romanticize the South so much. And I'm like, I think it'd be fun to apply to Southern schools and like see if there are any teams that could run there. So I literally just like went straight into research mode. I don't remember like what the website was. It was something like collegeboard.com or something. It's like a place where future students can like look into schools and like what they have to offer, what the size is like, what majors they have, like what on-campus activities they have, and like what the campus looks like. I was just like addicted to this website, right? Like researching as many schools as I could. And then as soon as I saw a school that I thought was cool and I'm like, it would be fun to go here, I would look up their cross country teams and like compare my times to the girls on the roster currently there. I'm like, okay, I think I could hang here. Like I could probably be on the travel team here. Let me email the coach. And from there, I would just take the template that my friends gave me that had already graduated and they're all running D1. And I would email the coach and like give them my times and stuff. And I did a really like healthy mix of D1, D2, and D3. If it was an out-of-state school, I leaned more towards D1 just because I knew I could probably, if I found like a mid to low like D1 school as far as like strength of the team, I could probably get like a little bit of money and not just be a walk-on there. But then like in state, I did apply to like a few D3s that I could just like go and run out without scholarship. And yeah, I would say that's pretty much like the extent of my outreach program. It was just like me reaching out to these coaches and then scheduling like the initial phone call with them for them to see if I'd like be a good fit for the team. But yeah, I didn't actually act on like any letters that I received from coaches. I did get some. They would like send them to the team address or something like that. I don't know if that's still how it works, if they like send it to your coach and they like pass it out at practice. But I remember like all of us definitely like had that experience at one point or the other.
Yeah. I think it's probably changed a little bit. Obviously, social media has some sort of impact on it.
Yeah.
And, athletes are able to market themselves a lot more, obviously, with NIL, but there's so much more that I think goes into recruiting now than when you were in school, or at least definitely when I was in school, because social media didn't even exist then. So it's definitely evolved over those years. But as you're starting to kind of navigate this process, sending out these different emails and stuff like that, what type of response are you getting? And were you ever discouraged by a response that you got from a coach?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I don't remember exactly what the responses looked like, but I remember them like, usually answering me, whether they did it the first time and I sent a follow up, usually the second time, and being like, hey, let's hop on the phone quick. Like, I'd love to hear more about like what your running journey looks like and like what you're looking like from a school, and to tell you about the team. And so I did have like a few of those initial phone calls, and I feel like pretty quickly I was able to realize like, yeah, I have like athlete to coach chemistry with this coach. I feel like I would have a really enjoyable experience getting coached by them. And it sounds like they have a good team culture. And then there are some coaches I remember just being like, no, this would not work. And immediately knowing that. But typically I would get responses from emails I would send out. I remember I don't remember which school it was I wanted to go to, but I really wanted to go to a school in California, and I just could never get a hold of their coach. And that was like the only time that I was super discouraged. And on the flip side, like discouraged a little bit too, just because my grades weren't the strongest. I had maybe like a 3.1 coming out of high school, which is, I think, like great, like pretty much wherever you can get, like as long as you're trying your best, that's like the greatest thing you can hope for. But a lot of my friends were like 4.0s, 3.8, 3.9. And so I felt discouraged by that. Like, am I going to even be able to get into these places that I'm emailing because my grades aren't as high as like my friends and my teammates' grades? But I think that's like all part of the process too. It's like finding what works for you. Like, is this school's average GPA way higher than mine? And if so, like, is this something that I really even think is going to be a good fit for me? And like being able to talk with the coach about that as well, because I do know some coaches will kind of like flag down your application as long as you like meet a certain criteria, even if it's not a little bit below the school's average. And they'll be like, this person would still be a good fit at this university. I'd like to flag their application to let them in. Then the university can let you in, and like you can go further in the recruiting process after you submit your apps and get accepted to the places that you're talking to. So I would say those two things, like that's the main thing that really discouraged me. But quickly, it was very much so, like I just said, I narrowed down the schools to like where I think I would have chemistry with the team and the sports environment. And then also like what majors I was looking into. And do I think that I could do well academically at this school?
So you ultimately ended up at UNCW, right? And,
yeah.
That's very far from home.
It's
But
so
like,
random.
did you take a visit there? Did you take visits to other schools like that were very far away? I mean, California is a long ways away, right? Like
Hmm.
I went to school in Pennsylvania. I didn't go on trips to schools in California or really very far away that, my parents couldn't drive to. I wanted to at least be close enough to home so that my parents could get there. Were
Hmm.
you taking trips, flying across the country to see these different schools?
Yeah, I did. Which is like so insane in hindsight because I was literally 17 and like missing a day of school so I could take a red eye to North Carolina to just like see this place. I visited 3 schools. I don't know if this is still the rule now, but it's like 5 official visits where somebody can host you was when I was
Mm-hmm.
getting recruited. So I did UNCW was my first one. My second one I did Occidental, which was a D3 in California. It was in Orange County, so it was only like an hour and a half away from my parents. And that school, my dad and I had driven up earlier in the summer to go talk with the coach. Beautiful campus. And also, if anybody listening to this is interested in Occidental, literally the best school cafeteria in the entire world. It was like so great, but it was really expensive. And I just didn't have the grades to get in, unfortunately. And then my last visit I did in, I want to say December, I went to University of Hartford in Connecticut. And looking back, people are like, oh my God, why the heck did you choose Hartford from California? That is so random.
Yeah.
Like, I literally remember, like, I don't know, I was like looking at some, like, whatever conference they're in, like pictures from one of their meets. And I thought the Hartford uniforms were really cute. And so I looked up the school on my little college website and I saw that they had a really great communications program. I wanted to go to school for journalism and the campus looked really pretty. It looked like it was in a cool area. I've always romanticized New England as well growing up. Like, I'm so happy I finally got to live there. I think it's just such a beautiful and wonderful area. And so
Mm-hmm.
then I looked at the times and I saw they were kind of like in line with me. And so I just like shot an email out to the coach. I'm like, who knows where this will go? And they ended up recruiting me really hard. I got a pretty big scholarship package from them. It's a private school, so naturally it was just a little bit bigger, like than North Carolina would be, because
Mm-hmm.
it's private, small school. So like a lot of financial aid was given out to students. So I had like the best recruiting visit ever on that trip. It was so fun. And so I loved UNCW's campus because it was so beautiful. And I did really like the coach and like it's a beach school, just like really awesome. And their communications program was great as well. I ended up going through the communications program once I actually went there, but it was the dilemma of my lifetime, Hartford or UNCW. Um, and it
How
was
did you
so
pick?
random. What? What made me
How
pick?
did you how did you pick between the two?
At the end of the day, it like sounds so kind of naive in hindsight because now I've lived in places with harsh winters the last few years of my life, but the weather kind of, I was like, I don't know if I want to do winter. That sounds like a lot. And I ultimately felt like I would have a better time at UNCW without running than I would at Hartford, which I did. I quit my senior year. I didn't want to run anymore. I wanted to like explore more intensive classes in my major. And I just didn't have the collegiate running experience that I wanted to. And it was like, I felt unhealthy for me mentally. So I was right. I'm glad I made the decision. But like ultimately was like, yeah, I could foresee myself being happier at the school than I could at Hartford. And the whole package of like everything, housing, tuition together at UNCW was still relatively cheap. Like it was probably the same price as like a University of California school, which is in
Mm-hmm.
state for me. And Hartford, if I didn't run, there was like no way we'd be able to afford me going there because it's a private school. So that came into play too. And I'm happy I chose UNCW. Yeah. So it was random, but I just wanted to go far. And I always encourage like anyone young that I talk to now to like not limit yourself to in-state because it was hard. I missed my family a lot. I had like a lot of anxiety all throughout college, just being far away from like what I was familiar to. But I think it like set me up for success now, just being able to like, oh, I found a great job in like Seattle for sure. Let's do it. Like if I think this is the best move for me, I'm not scared to go somewhere new and try something new.
Mm-hmm. So as a 17, 18-year-old though, when you get to UNCW from California, what's the culture change for you? I mean, obviously the weather is different. It's still nice in North Carolina, but it's not California. But like,
Yeah.
and everyone around is obviously different too. So like, was it a really tough adjustment for you, or do you feel like you assimilated pretty quickly once you got there? Because, as athletes, we kind of have built-in friends. You
Hmm.
have teammates that are there to help you and everything else, and you can kind of adjust pretty quickly. Do you feel that you were able to adjust pretty quickly because you did have that built-in filter of friends on campus, or was it hard because you were coming from so far away?
Yeah, it was a mix of both. And like, I don't know if this is how a lot of public schools are, but like North Carolina, the in-state rate is like 80%. And there's only like 20% of out-of-state students. And I would say a huge majority of the out-of-state is definitely athletes. Like, there was one other guy who I'm still really close to from California. He was from San Diego and he was a pole vaulter. He only stayed at UNCW for a year and then he transferred to UC Berkeley. But aside from him, literally everyone was from Jersey, New York, or North Carolina. And that was kind of hard for me too, because like I remember a lot of North Carolina people on my team, like having friends or like knowing friends of friends or something that came from like another school in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And like I remember being so envious of that and like feeling left out. It's like, oh, you actually know people here and it's not that weird for you. Like I don't know anyone. It feels like super off-putting for me. Um, I had so much anxiety, which was like my first experience with anxiety. Um, my freshman year dorm. It was just hard. It was isolating, but like I did have like really great built-in friends. Like we lived in a suite with all of the girls on the cross country team, and then like the other track recruits were upstairs in a suite together, and it was like 8 of us. And the girl that lived in the room next door to me, Amanda, became like one of my best friends so quickly. I officiated her wedding like, a couple months ago. Like that was great. Like just having that closeness right away and like that bond of like being athletes, the first year athletes together.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think there's something to be said about having those built in friends, but I definitely wanted like more than that. I think coming from California, I had so many friends growing up in high school. Like, we have a huge group of friends that we're also close with. And so it just felt weird too, like being isolated almost, like with just my team friends. And I was really hoping to just get more involved, which I did later in college. But all of that accumulated together to say, I think like having to deal with that stress and discomfort in the beginning was definitely worth it, just being so far from home, because it made me so much more of an adaptable person later in college and later in life too. And then, yeah, I think anytime you have a team environment, it's just like it makes it so much easier to make friends and like closer relationships too, because you know what the other person is going through, whether that's like not having their best season or like training harder than they ever have in their life or adjusting to like a brand new practice schedule. It's like you all go through that together and you figure out how to support each other. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, you just kind of, touched on 3 points that I wanted to ask about is when within going across the country for school, you do have a brand new coach, new surroundings, new training schedule, new classes, new teachers. I mean, you name it, everything is brand new to you. How hard was it, or was it easy to kind of transition to that new culture with a new coach and new training and everything else? How did you adjust?
It was so hard for me. Like so hard on so many levels. And I think the hardest part for me was changing my mileage and the intensity. I probably ran like max on my biggest week, like 40 miles in high school. Like I said, I was a mid distance runner, but like I feel like I was a little more on like the longer mid distance side. Like I could run
Mm-hmm.
a really fast mile and move up to the 10K or the 5K, but I could like still run a half mile really great. That was my event. And so it was never focused on cross country. I was always just kind of like the person that would support the team. Like I was never the top scorer on the team or anything in cross country, but I was like more of like the middle of the pack, like a solid performer that could definitely help in like a bind. So like going into college and starting out on cross country, upping my mileage to like 50 miles a week, which is nothing compared to like what most girls are running and like what I ended up doing later on. So hard for me. I was exhausted all the time. Lifting was like, oh my God, so embarrassing. Like all of the girls were so much stronger than me. I couldn't even do a pull up. And like the weight coach used to have to like come and like pick me up while I was like on the little bar. It was so hard. I had a terrible first cross country season too. I was running times that I was running like sophomore, freshman year of high school. I was like, this is not me. What's going on? I was just so tired. It was like such a change, eating differently, being in the dorms and like having so much more of an intense workout routine. And I couldn't figure out how to make it work for myself. Luckily I got it down later in college. I feel like I had a pretty strong sophomore showing. And then junior year, I was kind of going through injuries again, so it wasn't great. But I think it like definitely helped me learn how to like figure out how to balance the things in my life, right? Like it was so hard to figure out what was going to take precedent, like school or my social life or running. And then when I'm running badly, it's like it's so hard to not make that the number one priority in your life because you're like, well, I'm doing the worst I've ever done, so I better put everything I have into this to make sure that it gets better. And when it still doesn't get better, it was like so discouraging. But luckily I had like a really great relationship with my coach, Lane Schweer. He was like definitely like a stop by my office anytime type of guy and like just would listen to like kind of what I was going through. He like wouldn't really get frustrated because I think he like understood where people were coming from and he was supportive. But yeah, it was really hard. And then I tore my other meniscus at the end of my season, like at the conference meet. I got second to last and I like legitimately never wanted to leave the house for an entire year after that. But like building up after that was hard, but like ultimately worth it. I think it just like, it's to say anybody going into college, like if it's like so much harder than you think it is, that's okay. And if you're doing so much worse than you expected, that's also okay. Like,
Yeah.
I really do believe stress is like always a catalyst for something better. So like learning how to deal with discomfort and exhaustion and still not doing what you want is like so important because it makes you figure out how you can just be better going down the line if you want to keep continuing with your sport.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that you talked about when you were coming into college was that you wanted to major in communications.
Mm-hmm.
And as your career is going and, you say you ended up, not running as a senior, is that when you, and you even said this, you wanted to take some harder courses. Is that when you started to have the conversation with yourself of who do I want to be when I leave UNCW? And, what types of answers did you get back when you start to have those internal conversations of what your priorities are to transition to an adult after being an athlete?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's so important for people to think about when they're considering like their college decision overall because yeah, in your head you're probably going to say like I love my sport so much, like there's no way I won't do it for the next 4 years. Like that sounds crazy. But then yeah, maybe there's like a bad season here too. You have some really gnarly injuries and it's just like really hard to get through. That was my experience. Like it was still my whole life, even though I was doing terribly my freshman year. And then rehab from the injury, like having access to athletic trainers and like getting better the number one priority was something so different to me. And so like that was like a lesson and hurdles I had to get through. But like I was so glad I did. I had the best cross country season of my life sophomore year. I ran so much faster than I ever thought I could. And I was doing like 70 miles a week, which is more than I ever thought. I was the fittest I've ever been. And I was like, wow, I'm so glad I stuck with this. It's such a high. Then shortly after that, I like faced really terrible anemia. I was just like, after the season was over and I took my break before indoor track started, I couldn't make it through a 2-mile run without just legitimately wanting to fall asleep. So I got some blood work done. I had really, really, really low ferritin levels. And so again, had like I struggled through my track season. It was hard. And we also had our team cut in like tentatively the girls cross country, boys cross country and track, girls track would stay. So I thought of maybe transferring. I did another visit up to University of Hartford. And like I applied and like got accepted and got money to run there again. And so it was just like all over the place, like that big life change. My boyfriend at the time was transferring. He ended up transferring to SUNY Geneseo. And it was just like such a off-putting experience, but like I still wanted to run and I still wanted to have that team environment. Then some of my friends ended up quitting too for junior year. And I stuck with it for another year while dating my boyfriend long distance. And it was just like, it was really hard. And that's kind of when I fully decided on communications instead of maybe business school or creative writing. And so I was like, okay, now I'm like really taking my core classes, and I started focusing on like integrated marketing, communications, and my journalism minor. And I thought my classes were like so great. I started getting like great mentorship from a couple of my professors. And my senior year, there were so many classes I really wanted to start taking, some like TV production classes. And I did a lot of on-camera work like junior year, and I wanted to keep doing that senior year and take like these capstone classes for that. And it was just really hard to manage with cross country and track. So I went back and forth so much. At this point, I had like joined a sorority too, just because I decided to stay at UNCW. And this was before they ended up bringing back the track and cross country teams and saying we could like reinstate it forever. So I was like, I need some friends outside of track and cross country. So I joined a sorority. I lived with some girls in my sorority my junior year. And so I kind of like my life was a little bit separate anyway. And I still wasn't running great. Like my anemia was still back and forth. And it just like, I had to really have like the honest conversation with myself the summer after junior year. Like, is it worth really putting in the work for this my senior year? Do I want to keep running, or do I want to explore this new aspect of my major that I love and like live with my other friends, have like a different type of social life than like I do when I'm running? And I remember I was like sitting at my summer job. I worked at a steakhouse downtown. I was folding napkins and I texted my dad and I was like, could we make it work? Like if I let go of my scholarship and I just didn't want to run senior year. He's like, yeah, for sure. So I went to my coach's office and I told him I didn't want to do it. And he was like, I totally get it. Like you have a lot going on and like you've really had up and downs with your health and your injuries in college. So like I 1000% understand if you just want to stop. And I had such a great time senior year. It was like totally different than my experience running, but like not to say it was better or worse. Like I was able to like be more social and go out on the weekends with my friends. Once we turned 21, like be able to go to the bars with them. And like, I was able to do the classes that like I loved. And it was my favorite experience of college by far, even more so than running, getting to do those classes. I made some amazing friends. I'm still in really close touch with my professor from those like capstone and really intense classes. And I lived at the beach with my friends, which I probably wouldn't have been able to do if I ran. So I think it's like all to say if one door is closed, another will open. And for me, suffering through injuries and health problems with my anemia was not worth it. I was not running the times I wanted. I was constantly disappointed in myself and like it just wasn't working. And like some people can get over that hump and get through that, but I could not. I didn't. So I'm like so happy I made the choice to walk away.
Yeah. How did you make the choice of staying at UNCW, right? There was, a chance for you to go to Hartford, a school that you had loved for a year, and you had been accepted and gotten money and everything else. How did you make that choice and say, this is where I'm going to stay and, see it through?
It was mostly like my anxiety and like experiencing anxiety and depression for the first time, and just like knowing that moving schools in that situation probably wouldn't have helped that. Like I really was just thinking, okay, if I stay here and I kind of just like try and work with like the familiarity and like the coaching that I know and the team that I know, I think ultimately that'll be better for my anxiety. Like I'll still have track. Like if cross country is forgone, so be it. It wasn't my sport anyway. And it was also like the same thing. I like loved my major at UNCW, and I loved my professors, and I loved the people in my major. And I was just like, if I quit track, I'll still love it here. I love this major. I love this school. I love Wilmington as a place. So I don't want to just change just for track and cross country, which is pretty much like why I would be changing. So it was kind of like mirrored to when I was 17 and made the decision versus when I was 19 and made the decision. And pretty much most of the people decided to stay, which ended up working out because our team got reinstated. So everything happened for a reason. It worked out really well. But I'm so glad I chose to stay. Like I said, just because like so many other doors opened up for me at UNCW besides just the team.
Mm-hmm. So once you decide you're going to stay, you finish out, you get to see, all your friends more. You get to live at the beach. You get to hit all of these courses that you wanted to hit and all these classes that you wanted to hit. And then it's time to graduate.
Mm-hmm.
What's that transition like? Because that's a whole new race. I mean, excuse the pun, but like that's a whole new race for you, right? Where you're thinking, where do I go from here? I'm from California, but I've been on the East Coast for this long. Like, do I go back? Do I stay here? What are all these questions that you now have in your head as a 21, 22-year-old that you probably didn't think much about as a 17, 18-year-old coming into UNCW?
Yeah, it was hard. And it was sad. I'll admit part of me was sad that I didn't graduate, finishing up like my last track season of my life. Like when I looked back, like I still had a couple of friends that were like going to the conference meet, and the girls did pretty well that year. And I just remember looking and being like, oh, part of me kind of wishes I just like stayed through and like really tried for like one last season, because I'm not going to have competitive running in this way as an adult, which is just not true. You can always find a competitive source as an adult, whether it's in your sport or another sport you want to try. But I didn't really think of that at the time. So I was like a little bit sad about that. I didn't really have any job prospects. I had interviewed at Flow for like a content marketing job, and I didn't get the job. It was between me and another guy, and he ended up getting it. So I didn't have any job prospects. I didn't want to stay in Wilmington just because it was far away from my family, and I didn't really have anything going on either. So I decided to move back home. I lived at home for 6 months post grad and was interviewing at a few different places. And then I got the job at Flow in Austin. Literally had never been to Austin, but I was just like, I want to work here. So I'm going to move, and I'm just going to do it. And I think because I decided to go to a place that was so random in respect to where I had grown up in California, I was able to just be like, okay, cool. I'm just going to go. It doesn't really matter. Like, I will find friends there. I will find my niche, and I will like it. And it did work out. I was in Austin for 3.5 years, and I had a great time there. I had such a lovely experience working at my first job out of college at Flow Sports. And it set me up for success later in my life. Like, my career has flourished since then. I work in marketing. I didn't end up really staying with the journalism route, which is so funny because my boyfriend's a journalist, and he like runs the news portion of Runner's World. So I guess I've come full circle. But yeah, I think everything like seems like it's so concentrated when you're in college. Like, these are do or die decisions, but like it never was for me. Like, my life didn't end because I quit the sport that I came to the school to do. It got better in a lot of ways. And like, I did have the opportunity to get over an adjustment hump and have like one killer season where like I was loving it. I was like so deep into like this committed, like monk like state to cross country where I was doing doubles. I was crushing it in the weight room. Like, I feel like I had so many different experiences in one college experience. And like, I think that is probably my biggest advice to anybody looking at a D3 school, a mid to lower like D1 program. Like, it really is like what you want to put into it and like how you want to control it. Which is like great. I think that's amazing. And it doesn't have to be, it can be as intense as you want it to be in any aspect of your collegiate life.
Yeah. So, Parker, we have now reached our 5 questions part of the conversation. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a rapid fire answer, but give a little context to it. So first question is, what was it like in your first college competition, where you realized this is something that if I'm going to continue doing it, I have to make some changes? What was that first kind of epiphany race that you had?
Yeah, it was my first race. Uh, we went to an invitational at App State at like the end of August, I want to say. It was really hot. Like you mentioned earlier, the weather in North Carolina is way different than California. It's humid, it's hot, it's sticky. And so I had been doing like okay in workouts. I did pretty well in the time trials. Going into the season, we came a week early before the rest of the other students alive and did time trials. We did a 2 mile time trial. We did a 200-meter time trial. We did a quick, like, I want to say like 60-meter sprint time trial. And then we did a 7.5 mile time trial. So like a huge variety. And I did amazing in the 2 mile time trial. I like PR'd. I crushed the sprint ones, and then the 7.5 one I was so scared of because I wasn't a distance runner, but I ended up finishing third out of like 20 girls that were like trying out for the team, and ran like faster than I ever thought possible. So I like felt so good going into the season. I was like, wow, this is gonna be the best yet. My summer training is paying off. And then after a couple of weeks of like the practices and like the new college schedule adjustment, our first race happened, and I think I ran like a 21-minute 5K, which is like, I was running like low 19s in high school. So I'm like, oh my God, what is wrong with me? And like, I was struggling in the race. I literally wanted to drop out. Like, I just remember after like mile one, just constantly thinking the whole race, I'm done. This is horrible. I don't want to do this race anymore. And after that, it was like, okay, I need to find ways where I can like optimize my recovery and like not just be so worn out all the time, which is so hard, like as a freshman living in a dorm. But I think there are definitely resources to figure it out. So first college experience, not great. But I remember it being like so exciting before I started having a bad race. Like the first mile, I was thinking, this is so cool. I'm running with all these college girls. Like, this is amazing. Like, there's something to be said about your first collegiate competition. Like, there's nothing like it. It's so exciting.
Mm-hmm. Second question, academically, you said in high school you had like a 3.0, 3.1, something like that. When you got to college, what was it like for you? What was that class that either made you second guess your major or solidified that that's the major that you wanted to be in?
Yeah, I think it was probably media law. It was my first time having a journalism class with this one specific professor, Mr. Purnell, and it was so fun. He was able to like simplify it in a way that everybody could understand, and it was just so interesting, like learning about the different divisions of journalism and like what could happen in journalism and what the possibilities were. So after that, I started taking a lot more journalism classes, and that's when I decided for it to be my major and or my minor. And I just remember being like, wow, this is so interesting to me. Like, I could see myself being really happy if I did this every single day as my career. And I explored like a couple other divisions of communications within the major, and I landed on integrated marketing comms. And those classes were like so fun for me too. Like, just having something that like really clicked for me was so cool because like I wasn't the best student in high school. I did really well in AP English and AP Psych, like those types of classes. And so getting through those general classes the first couple of years of college before I got to the fun stuff, it was kind of like, okay, this is just school to me. And then once I was able to do communications classes, I was like, it's so fun. I look forward to going to class, and I care about my homework, and I like care about doing a really nice job on this paper and this project. And like, it's such an amazing feeling. I think that's like the best part of college is like just being able to take classes that are really cool and like that you could see yourself having a career in. Like, you don't know what you're going to step into after college yet. So like those possibilities are endless and so fun.
Mm-hmm. What's a race, whether it be when you were 12 or 13, or a race you had in high school, or a race you had in college, that you will never forget. And it's definitely something different than that first one you had in college. It's one of the races where either you did better than you thought you were going to do, or maybe worse than you thought you were going to do. But it's something about that race that will always kind of stick with you.
Yeah. I'll choose a college one just because I feel like that's the most applicable for people maybe listening to this podcast. And it was a course that I had run freshman year, and I had dropped out of the race freshman year because I was just having the same feelings that I was in the first race. I was like in no man's land, kind of by myself, way behind everybody. And like there was this creek portion of the race I had to go through, and I tripped when I was going through it. And I was just like, I'm done. We're done. We're not doing it. And so I came back sophomore year, and that's when I was kind of like gearing up, getting my season going. I was started like being able to keep up with the girls towards the top of the pack of the team in workouts and like feeling really good about myself. And we hadn't raced in a few weeks. The course was gnarly. I don't remember what school it was. It was we're in Virginia, kind of in the middle of nowhere. And it had these like insane hills that were so long and like this steep. You had to run through a creek. And there were these really thick, like muddy parts of it too. And I was like so nervous because I had had that terrible race their freshman year, and I had dropped out, which is the first time and the only time I had ever dropped out of a race. Even when I tore my meniscus at conference freshman year and got second to last, I still finished. And I ended up doing so well. I was able to keep up through the first mile and just say like, okay, don't panic. Like you're going a little faster than normal, but just keep pushing and keep trying. And I stayed in the race the whole time. I was able to keep up closer to the top girls on the team. And like, I remember calling my dad after and just being like, Dad, I finally had like a race that I'm so proud of. Like I wasn't number one. I probably wasn't even number 2 or 3. I was probably way more towards the middle of the pack, but I was like, I might get to make the travel team like this year to keep going. If we go to like a regionals trip, I might get to go. Like I'm doing really well, and it was really hard, but it didn't feel like so hard that I was just like thinking negatively the whole time. I was actually able to feel like I could race and like have that racer's mentality. Like, okay, if you go faster here, you're going to move up a little bit, or like you are going to have a better time, like compete with the other people in the race and with myself. And like that was such a special feeling. And it like was for sure the like few races I had in college after that where it like clicked, where I was like, okay, this was so worth it. I'm so glad I stuck through it. I'm so proud of myself too.
Mm-hmm. Career-wise, as a professional, you said, back in college at least, you said you had classes that really clicked for you and that were really great. Once you get into the professional realm, it's different, very different. You're trying to apply all those things that you learned. You're trying to learn new things. You're sometimes, if you're like me, realizing that a lot of things you learned in class are not the same once you get into the real world.
Yeah.
But what was the first assignment that you had once you got out of college that you were able to apply those things and it was like, okay, I really do belong in this profession?
Definitely my first job out of college. I was so lucky. You worked at Flow Sports. It was such a unique place to work, and like we focused on marketing these sports that we had probably competed in college. Like I worked a lot with mile split, and I worked a lot with flow track, and I know you worked on flow wrestling. So like it was just really, really cool to be able to have that be my first experience out of college and like have it be something I was passionate about while learning the ropes of marketing. Just because I agree with you, like nothing I focused on in college was really what I like focused on later in life in my adult profession. But it was great. It was such a nice place to explore. I think like finding a mid-sized company to work at after college is such a good fit. I was able to host a podcast with Miles Split, even though that was like completely unrelated to what I did every single day. And ended up like finding the opportunities to like go travel to events and do event marketing and stuff. And just like finding new ways that you can make yourself productive and like search to find out what you really want to do was like so special to me at Flow Sports. And I was so sad to leave that job just because it was kind of where I like figured out what I was figuring out in college. Like, how can I figure out these things that make me happy and like make me feel like I want to keep pushing and finding new ways to be a valued member of the team at this company. I like totally pivoted once I left Flow Sports, I worked at the Boston Globe for a little over a year. I switched to like sponsorship marketing, which is so different than journalism or like creative brand marketing, social media, the type of stuff that I was doing at Flow Sports and in college. And now I do like marketing automation at Comcast. I manage marketing strategy for a couple of our advertising sites. So it's like, I think your career just like changes and develops and keeps going. And it kind of ties back to like the whole dilemmas I had in college. Like you just got to keep rolling with the punches and like seeing what doors open for you, where it can take you, and like how it can make you happy in this new stage of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right about that. There's so many different aspects of media that you can kind of fit into, and it's always evolving every single day.
Yeah.
But last question, and same question as that everybody else gets. What's a piece of advice, either an epiphany moment that you had during your career as as a cross country and track runner, or something you learned in your profession, or something a coach taught you or a friend or teammate taught you that really stuck with you that the next generation should definitely know?
I would say it comes from my dad. And circling back from the beginning of the conversation, I was not the fastest kid ever before this day. And I showed up to a track meet in my usual soccer shorts and my big bulky tennis shoes, while the other girls were in like their cute spandex outfits with like the racing flats and everything. My dad was like, you can do this. Like, you're a really fast runner. I've been on runs with you. Like, just try and see where it can go. If you tucker out the first half of the race and you get last, I don't care. Just try. And that like carried with me throughout my entire life. I'd say I always still go hard in the paint right from the get-go. And if it doesn't work out, then it's like, okay, time to pivot. And like, if I finish last, that's okay. But like, that'll teach me where I need to pivot and like how I can make a situation better and ultimately succeed the next time I get an opportunity. And from that day on, I was I was always known for like opening up a race really fast and like not being afraid to just like charge right from when the gun went off. And I think I'm still that way now, like moving to a new city for a new job. Let's do it. Trying something new in my career, like hosting a podcast when I've literally never done that in my life. Let's do it. Like that moment, just telling me to just try no matter what, like I think is so important for anybody. Like if you're scared that you're not going to get into a college, or like you're going to be the worst person on the team, but you still want to do it, like there's a reason I think that you want to do it. So just try. Like something is going to work out, even if it's not what you are expecting to work out.
Yeah. Parker, that's it. This was great. This was awesome. Like I said, and I said the same thing to Katie, we're in the office for so long together. We're working, so closely on all these different projects and all these different events. And we never actually, talk about our experiences as athletes. We just kind of bring that with us to the projects and the things that we're working on. So it's always great to catch up with people that, we worked so closely together on so many different things. We were in the same office for so long. So this was great. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to kind of open up and talk about the hard stuff, the fun stuff, starting your career out. Do you have anything else before I let you go?
No, thank you for having me. It was really great. And I hope the people that you're helping with Athletes to Athletes, it's like the best product ever. I wish it was around when I was in college. Like showing them that you can go anywhere and do anything you want to is like the real deal. So I hope whoever is using Athletes to Athletes, you get what you're looking for out of it, because it's great.
Thank you for listening to the Athletes to Athletes podcast. To make sure you don't miss when a new episode comes your way, head to the Athletes to Athletes YouTube page to like and subscribe, or to Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcast. Again, we appreciate you listening, and we'll see you again next time.